which is that an idea is a single thing, something that happens often in a wonderful, illuminating moment. But in fact, what I would argue, and what you really need to kind of begin with, is this idea that an idea is a network on the most elemental level, right? I mean, this is what is happening inside your brain. An idea, a new idea, is a new network of neurons firing in sync with each other inside your brain. It's a new configuration that has never formed before, right? And the question is, how do you get your brain into environments where these new networks are going to be more likely to form? And it turns out that, in fact, the kind of network patterns of the outside world mimic a lot of the network patterns of the internal world of the human brain. So the metaphor I'd like to use is actually, I can take from
So you hear a lot of talk these days about the quantified self revolution. Everything is being tracked. We have metrics for everything. We're extending sensors into everything, and all of a sudden creating an influx of data. So everything is tracked online. Now everything is tracked in our body. We live in a world in which human beings have been reduced, have been turned into algorithmic cascades of data. And most people are terrified of this notion of infinite tracking. But I think the quantified self revolution potentially can reveal us to ourselves. It can become the ultimate mirror. Because you know what happens with those algorithmic cascades? These observers, human beings, will now be able to see themselves as structures, as patterns amidst the data. We'll be able to take data set of millions of people, measuring millions of metrics of data, and find patterns, and find spaces of interconnection, and find emergent self-organization that is occurring on these meta patterns and then these different scales. We'll get what Stephen Johnson calls the long view. We'll get the equivalent of the microscope or the telescope for units of information, for data sets. Who knows what we might learn about ourselves? How might we be able to take that data and use those insights to feed them back into us, right? Creating that effective moment of ontological design where that information acts as feedback that further changes how we act and changes how we optimize the world and society. The quantified self-revolution is an upgrade for this operating system, this man-machine operating system. It's humans versions 2.0. That's quantified self.
Valuing the premise of connecting ideas and not just protecting them. And I'll leave you with this story, which I think captures a lot of these values, and it's just a wonderful kind of tale of innovation and how it happens in unlikely ways. It's October of 1957, and Sputnik has just launched. And we're in Laurel, Maryland, at the Applied Physics Lab associated with Johns Hopkins University. And it's Monday morning, and the news has just broken about this satellite that's now orbiting the planet. And of course, this is nerd heaven, right? There are all these physics geeks who are there thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible, I can't believe this has happened. And two of them, two 20-something researchers at the APL, are there at the cafeteria table having an informal conversation with a bunch of their colleagues. And these two guys are named Geyer and Weifenbach. And they start talking, and one of them says, hey, has anybody tried to listen for this thing? There's this, man-made satellite up there in outer space. It's obviously broadcasting some kind of signal. We could probably hear it if we tune in. And so they ask around to a couple of their colleagues, and everybody's like, no, I hadn't thought of doing that. That's an interesting idea. And it turns out Weifenbach is kind of an expert in microwave reception, and he's got a little antenna set up with an amplifier in his office. And so Geyer and Weifenbach go back to Weifenbach's office, and they start kind of noodling around, hacking, as we might call it now. And after a couple of hours, they actually start picking up this signal, because the Soviets made Sputnik very easy to track. It was right at 20 megahertz, so that you could pick it up really easily, because they were afraid that people would think it was a hoax, basically. So they made it really easy to find it. And so these two guys are sitting there listening to this signal, and people start kind of coming into the office and saying, wow, that's pretty cool. Can I hear it? Wow, that's great. And before long, they think, well, geez, this is kind of historic. We may be the first people in the United States to be listening to this. We should record it. And so they bring in this big clunky analog tape recorder, and they start recording these little bleeps, and they start writing down the kind of time stamps for each little bleep that they record. And then I start thinking, well, gosh, we're noticing small little frequency variations here. We could probably calculate the speed that the satellite is traveling if we do a little basic math here using the Doppler effect. And then they played around with it a little bit more, and they talked to a couple of their colleagues who had other kind of specialties, and they said, geez, I think we could actually look at the slope of the Doppler effect to figure out the points at which the satellite is closest to our antenna and the points at which it's furthest away. That's pretty cool. And eventually they get permission, and this is all a little side project that, hadn't been officially part of their job description, but they get permission to use the new, UNIVAC computer that takes up an entire room that they'd just gotten at the APL, and they run some more of the numbers. At the end of about 3 or 4 weeks, it turns out they have mapped the exact trajectory of this satellite around the Earth just from listening to this one little signal, going off on this little side hunch that they've been inspired to do over lunch. See, I have these new nuclear submarines that I'm building, and it's really hard to figure out how to get your missile so that it will land right on top of Moscow if you don't know where the submarine is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we're thinking we could throw up a bunch of satellites and use it to track our submarines and figure out their location in the middle of the ocean. Could you work on that problem? And that's how GPS was born. 30.
Now, when you go to Ezekiel chapter 28 and you go to Obadiah, it links this situation up because, and you go to Second Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. It links all of this up because in verse 4 of Obadiah, it say, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, he say, hence will I bring thee down, says the Lord. Now, that's what he's talking about with the satellites, because that was the beginning of when these Edomites was going to start to think like Ezekiel 28 said. Ezekiel 28 chapter 1, verse 1, Salakia. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 1. It say, the word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, and that's kind of how they was saying the signal. They found a way to get the signal from the satellite. But on a bigger scale, the signal wasn't coming from the satellite. It was a signal coming from the Most High. But going into the verse, Ezekiel 28 and verse 2, it says, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyrus, thus says the Lord God, because thy heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am God. See, these Edomites saying that they are the creator. They're creating these situations. And it say, I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man and not God. See, though thou set thy heart as the heart of God. What did Obadiah say? Thou hast exalted thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars. See, your nest is where you live at. Is your living in habitation. And your main habitation is your mind and your ideals and your thoughts. So they trying to say that they done set their hearts up in outer space, and it's all they're doing. That's why he said, the pride of your heart have deceived you, whose habitation is high, that saith in this heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? So they, in their heart, they're saying that they are God. But God is saying, yet thou art a man and not God. See? But they set their mind to be God. Verse 3. This is Ezekiel 28 verse 3. Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from thee. So this situation sparked off the internet. See, and this is going back to DARPA. And I'm gonna cut it short. I don't want to give them too much. But this is all going back to DARPA. And this is the motive of the so-called white man, who is the Edomite. This is the motive and the agenda. See, a motive and agenda is go hand in hand. When you're thinking about a crime that people commit, and when you're a lawyer or a judge in that situation, you thinking about what was the motive of the crime, and especially a fugitive or somebody that's just they're a suspect. That's like Nelly Fuller. He like to say, I'm not gonna say that they're a race soldier, but they're a suspect. I'm suspecting that they're a race soldier, looking at the evidence. And so, looking at the evidence of these Edomites, and with the evidence that, which is faith, that God gave us through His Spirit and His Word, these people's agenda is to be God, is to have no secret that can be hidden from them. And so it's a defense, because DARPA is a defense system. And one of the main things that they pushing at DARPA is to connect computers with man, and the main reason is that nobody can terrorize them. If it was somebody that was going to try to terrorize them, they would be able to put a GPS tracking device on that person or that group of people, and they would not be able to terrorize them. So that's why you got the Defense Department pushing all of the DARPA, and another company got with the health department company, or whoever do the health stuff for health whatever, and they pushing the Mandora. So you got this is a defense. It's not a defense from disease. This is an all-around defense, and it's mainly for terrorists, people that want to terrorize the so-called white man, and who are the Edomites. And so they're pushing to make themselves God. But God done gave their motive and showed, once they go out there in the outer space, I'm going to send them into outer space pretty much, and they going to think that they on my level. But they don't understand, like Ezekiel 28 in the second verse say, yet thou art a man and not God. Even though you understanding what's going on, that you be getting this great power, and you starting to formulate certain things, but your pride gonna deceive you to think that you is doing this, and it's really God doing this. God is setting this situation up, but they so prideful. It's nothing to deceive them. And see, pride coming for destruction, like Proverbs 16 and 18. Pride come before destruction. And so the way He's destroying them is to giving them something that's going to get them prideful, that's going to make them think that they up there with God, and they in a God like state, because they saying I am God. So when you throw the thinking that's going to destroy you, because now you don't got too prideful, and you don't know I done set the whole situation up. But I'm going to leave it there. All praise to Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Kakadash. Double honors to the elders pushing the truth. Peace to the elect worldwide. Our kingdom of Israel is at hand. Shalom.